Hello writers, I hope you're all participating in the Nanowrimo 2018 Novel Challenge. Tonight we're going to talk about Day 2, and I'm going to give you the information as far as my progress is concerned, and we're going to have a question received from one of my viewers, and we're going to answer that, and then we're going to have Allison read you Chapter 1. So, let's get started.
Oh, hey, I'm glad you showed up. The movie's about to start. It's supposed to be a really good one.
All right, it's Day 2. I hope you've been writing. I hope you've got your story in progress. And I want to thank all of you for all the views I've gotten on these videos so far. I appreciate it very much. Maybe some of you are sharing them with others. And if you are, I greatly appreciate it. But first, let's get to the question from Sheila. And this was on the last video, Day 1 video. Sheila writes, I have writer's block already. I'm trying to figure out a good way to transition from place to place so I can carry on with my plot. Any tips? All right, I'm going to give you my input on this, and I hope others will leave comments and tell you what they do to transition from place to place. First of all, I thought about your question, and I came up with 3 different ways that you can do this. First of all, if you're going from, let's say you have a character named Susan, and she is a teenager, and she's going to school every morning and then home at night and then maybe out with her friends, roller skating or bowling or whatever. If you want to transition her from her home to her school, you can one of 2 ways. You can either have Susan go to sleep and then wake up and head to the other place, or come back as a narrator from the other place. For example, Susan thought about everything that had happened that day, and she knew tomorrow was going to be trouble. She had a hard time going to sleep, but she finally dozed off and slept rather peacefully. That's terrible narration, but it's just off the top of my head. Okay, and that's the end of that chapter. Or you can leave that chapter with a cliffhanger, if you can, do some foreshadowing as to what might happen tomorrow and what she's worried about. Okay, so she goes to sleep. Now, the transition, she can either wake up the next morning with a jolt, remembering what was going to happen that day, or, you can go through the motions of her getting ready for school, getting dressed, and the whole time she's thinking about the horrible thing that might be happening at school when she gets there. And then you can take her through the motions of getting to school, getting off the bus, looking around to see if whatever that threat was might be there. Or you can have her go to sleep at night and end that chapter, and then when the next chapter begins, the bus came to a stop in front of the doors of the high school. Susan didn't want to get off, but she finally got her courage up, got up and walked down the line to the door, and she was the last one off, and then she looked around. Okay, that's a couple of different ways you can handle that transition. One other one that I thought of, and I used it quite a bit in my novel, The Ghost of Skullhaven. This story is about an orphan named Lily White, whose mother has disappeared, and then her Nana dies that winter, and so she's left all alone, and they have to send her to the Sacred Heart orphanage right across the street from Skullhaven Cemetery. Anyway, she's living with Sister Rosemary and Sister Carmen, a couple of nuns that are very nice to her, and there is a villain in this story named Horace Hazas. I won't say any more about his name, but anyway, Horace Hazas, he really is one. He wants the ancient Egyptian ankh that Lily has gotten from Sister Carmen. And Sister Carmen knows that it's enchanted. And he recognizes it and he wants it. So the whole thing is about Horace trying to get this ankh and Lily and the sisters trying to prevent him from getting it. So there are transitions in this book where the sisters pull the old Chevy Celebrity out of the driveway at the nursery that Sunday morning and they head to church. They're going down the highway. Now here comes the transition. If they had noticed, they would have seen Tony Luviano's black Jaguar pull into the mansion at the end of Horace Hezas's driveway and head toward the electronic metal gates. Tony goes in there and talks to Horace for quite a while. And just as he's about to leave to get in his Jaguar, the transition comes in again and it says, meanwhile, the sisters have finished listening to the extra long sermon from Father Mulcahy and are walking out to their car. So it's kind of like the old Western serials, meanwhile, back at the ranch. So, and it's kind of a comedic form, but not overly. I mean, you don't have to make it comedic. But anyway, that's my input on that question. I hope it's helpful. And I hope others will comment on how they do transitions in their stories. So, Sheila, I hope you get something out of that, and I appreciate the question very much. So now, and since I said I was going to do a tip every day, I think we kind of covered that tip with Sheila's question. So let's get to it. Allison is here, and she's ready to read chapter 1. I hope you enjoy it. So Allison, if you're ready, go ahead, and I hope you're ready to read to us. So go ahead and let's go.
Yes, Michael, I would be happy to. I must admit that I'm kind of excited to see what happens. Let's begin. Chapter 1, A Twilight Shadow. It's a lazy autumn afternoon, October 31st to be exact, Halloween. I'm relaxing on the veranda, waiting for my little brother, Andy, to come home from school. He's usually home long before now. I'm thinking he may have decided to go trick-or-treating with some of his school friends. I know he's old enough to take care of himself, but I still worry about him. Halloween isn't a big deal at our house. The estate is so huge, and we're so far from the road, that we never get any trick-or-treaters. And we never go either, because there aren't any houses within walking distance. At 15, Andy is able to drive with a learner's permit, and he's been pestering Dad to let him drive Uncle Conrad's Corvette to school. But Dad hasn't given in yet, and Andy's been stuck with our old Jeep Wrangler for now. But I'm sure Andy is counting the days. There's a strange relationship between boys and sports cars, and Andy does spend considerable time out there in the garage, waxing and polishing that beautiful white Stingray, wishing and hoping for the day when Dad says yes. I'm glad I graduated from high school this year. It was less than 6 months ago when I walked across that huge stage and Mr. Burlingame handed me my diploma. I was so nervous with everyone watching, and I was hoping I wouldn't fall off of those high heel shoes that Mom had loaned me for the occasion. When I got home later that afternoon, I hung the coveted document on my wall and looked at my name written on it in beautiful calligraphy. Robin Sherwood, it said. I still glance at it almost every time I go in my bedroom. Even though it's an unseasonably cool day, I'm still enjoying a glass of Mrs. Devenbaugh's delicious sweet iced tea. She brews it every morning. In addition to that regular task, she also takes care of the cleaning and cooking all our meals and basically takes care of the house for us. She's always been helpful and quick to answer any request I might have for her, as long as she's wearing her hearing aids and understands what I'm asking. The raspy braying of an old mule floats out of the stable and across the pasture. That's Bo Diddley, Warner's old mule. telling the world that he's hungry again. Warner McCorkle is our hired hand, but he's been here so long that he's become a member of the family, more like a grandfather. To the west, the sky is ablaze with crimson and gold as the sun sinks lower over the bayou. It's pleasant, but New Orleans weather usually doesn't cool down this much, even in late October. The smooth weathered wood of the veranda floor feels cold when my bare feet push against it to set my rocking chair in slow motion, and I shoo a pestering green fly from the rim of my bright turquoise metal glass. We have a whole set of them in various colors. They are my favorite glasses. The colors are festive, and the metal seems to make your drink much colder than a regular glass does. The bright yellow lemon slice floating on top doesn't stop the metallic clinking of the ice cubes when I give my drink a swirl. I take a sip and allow my mind to wander back in time to that day, to that most horrible day that's now seared into my memory forever. It's been 4 years since the events played out during that blistering summer of 1963. I was 14. A quick calculation in my head tells me Andy was only 11 at the time. And speaking of the time, I'm still wondering where Andy is. He should have been home from school by now, even though he won't get in trouble with Mom and Dad, since they're on a business trip to London. They should be leaving Southampton today aboard the Queen Mary. It's supposed to be her last voyage, and the ship won't arrive in Long Beach, California until December 9th. They'll probably take the train home from there so they can relax and not have to drive. A jet would have been quicker, but Mom has refused to fly ever since their plane crashed in the bayou 4 years ago. That's why they decided to take a cruise ship to London for the meeting. My mind returns again to that summer of 1963. It all began when our Uncle Conrad showed up and parked his white Corvette in our circular driveway with a Roman fountain in the center. That's the car I was talking about earlier, the one Andy's hoping to drive soon. Anyway, everything seemed normal at first, until the sun reflected off the silver metal claw where Uncle Conrad's left hand used to be. The bright silver claw was clamped on the top of a soft brown paper sack that I found out later contained blueberries. Our uncle had been called by the Child Protective Services Department in New Orleans, and he had arrived at the estate that morning to assume his official duties as guardian for the two of us. Since our parents had been proclaimed presumed dead shortly after their plane disappeared in the bayou. If our parents were dead, Andy and I were the sole heirs to the huge Sherwood fortune. I recall the events of that evening when we were eating dinner in our formal dining room. It was just Andy, me, and Uncle Conrad. We were sitting at the big mahogany table and enjoying the beautiful roast Mrs. Steffenbois had prepared for us, along with her fluffy mashed potatoes, her deliciously rich, brown gravy, and her famous buttermilk biscuits, still toasty and warm from the oven. That night, everything had begun in a friendly manner, but as we ate our dinner, things began to change dramatically. It started out slowly, but it escalated very quickly, and resulted in Uncle Conrad's threats to kill us, so that he could inherit the family fortune. I remember my shock when he threatened to pull out our fingernails, or snip off our toes with Mom's garden nippers if we didn't play what he called his killing game. One toe at a time, he had said, and we'll save the big ones for last. We thought he was kidding. He wasn't. The memories tumble over themselves as they come back to mind in crystal clarity. I remember the bright red blood oozing out slowly and staining Andy's starched white shirt after Conrad's metal claw hand cut through it and sliced Andy's chest. And later that evening, after our uncle fell asleep in a drunken stupor, I remember our frantic rush to collect what we needed to make our escape to the bayou. My Zenith transistor radio is on the metal table next to my chair, and the crystals are singing "Then He Kissed Me." It makes me think of Michelle. I recall how he had found me and Auntie in the Cajun shanty that night. I remember being impressed with his skill as he guided the pirate through the alligator-infested waterways in the bayou after taking us safely across the wide expanse of Skullhaven Lake. I can almost see the children dancing in the torchlights when we arrived at the Voodoo Swamp. I remember the brief encounter with Fabian Lavo later that night when we found Mom and Dad lying on those small cots in a room filled with snakes. It gives me a shiver just thinking about it now. But my mind quickly flies to that night when Michelle visited the estate after our adventure was over. I was so happy to see him again. The crystals are at the chorus now, and I sing along with them as they continue. He kissed me in a way that I've never been kissed before. He kissed me in a way that I want to be kissed forevermore. My happy thoughts disappear when I remember the horror of the cellar, the cold, and the darkness that was only broken when the lightning flashed outside the cellar window. I'll never forget that sound. Nor the sound as the gun fired when Uncle Conrad shot me. Finally, I remember those horrific screams when the authorities wrestled Uncle Conrad into the ambulance and closed the heavy metal doors behind him. Of all these images, the most vivid is his eyes. Crazed and manic as he stares at me through the dirty glass of the ambulance window, showing the insane hatred in his soul. I couldn't hear his voice that night, but as the red lights of the police cars reflected from the raindrops on the glass, I watched as Conrad mouthed the words, "Robin, I'll get you for this." Since that stormy night, I've worked really hard to forget that terrible incident and everything that led up to it. But I haven't. It's still there, just below the surface, and it's still frightening. On those occasions when I'm lying in my bed at night, and I hear something outside my window, it might be dry twigs snapping under a footfall, or something crunching the dry autumn leaves. It could be any sound, but on those occasions my heart will race and all those horrible memories will come rushing back. It's even worse if there's a summer storm raging outside. I push the memories back down into their dark place and notice that the sun has sunk below the horizon and disappeared into the blackness of the bayou. The temperature has dropped a few degrees, and the tree frogs are joining the crickets in their evening serenade. It's time to go in, and Auntie still hasn't come home. I'm hoping Mrs. Devonwell's pecan pie is ready to come out of the oven. I can smell the sweet aroma from here. Her singing floats down the long entry hall as I open the screen door and head toward the kitchen. As a cook, Mrs. D is brilliant. As a singer, not so much. When I pass the wide French doors leading into the expansive living room, even in the fading light outside the window, the corner of my eye picks up a dark image moving quickly past it. By the time I turn my head, it's disappeared into the gathering shadows of twilight as the black blanket of night is beginning to settle and wrap around the house.
Thank you, Allison. I hope you all enjoyed that. Now, keep in mind that's the unedited version. It will be polished up better in the final form, but we're not doing that right now. So, to bring you up to speed, I'm setting at 2,276 words so far. I'm about 1,000 words behind. I hope you're doing better than that. There are days when you will write a lot, and there's days when you will struggle to get 100 words on the page. Don't be discouraged. Don't let that bother you. What I typically do is try to end at a point where I know what's going to happen next, but I don't write that yet. So I wait till the next time I sit down and I start at that point because I know where I'm heading from there. So anyway, that's it for now. This has been a long video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you'll leave a comment. I hope you'll like it. I hope you'll share it. And I hope you keep writing. So until I speak with you again, and even after that, you stay focused.